Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Contour community meeting. We're kicking these off again here in June 2019. Super excited to have you all here. And yeah, for this community meeting, we'll go through the roadmap of Contour. We'll talk about the work that we have done and work that we might need some help with. So I want to share the agenda here with everyone so everyone knows what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about the new website and then patches and the 0.13 beta. But I'll hand it over to Dave here, who can talk more about all the topics here in the agenda.
Good morning, good afternoon, if that's where you are in the world. Thank you very much, Ernest. So the agenda we have is, first of all, we have a lovely spiffy new website. Perhaps none of you knew about our old GitHub Pages powered website, which was kind of this thing that kind of took all the markdown in the repo and kind of like tried to make a Jekyll site out of it and kind of excreted it onto a GitHub Pages. We never actually published it, so I think it's fair to say that only a very select few knew about it, and even less of them got value from that. But the great news is that that's all in the past. We have wonderful new kind of like the home of Contour is projectcontour.io, and over the next release cycle, we're going to be that's going to be the home of the documentation. So unlike like the docs directory and the design directory, all of that will be moving to projectcontour.io. So that's the big plan over the next couple of weeks to integrate that. Yeah, when I get back from KubeCon China. The next thing is the 0.12.1 patch. If you take nothing from this next section, don't use anything less than 0.12.1. That means not 0.12 and not 0.11, and certainly nothing before then. The bug that was fixed there is to do with everyone's old friend, scaling a service to 0. What would happen is if you had a service scaled to 0 in your cluster and you restarted your Contour pods, Envoy would wedge on startup because it's told there's a cluster here, and it says, okay, if it's a cluster, I need to go and get the members. But because the service has been scaled to 0, there are no members, and it just kind of stops. The underlying technical details of this are there's an ambiguity in the gRPC protocol between that we use between Contour and Envoy that makes it difficult to know how to say nothing's there. It's kind of the difference between an empty glass and no glass at all. And sometimes Envoy, when it asks a very specific question, you have to give it an answer, even if you don't have any answer to give it. Other times, if it asks a question, it's totally okay to just ignore it. So finding these edge cases is always fun, and they always seem to, if you've read the Monzo outage from a couple of years ago, our old friend scaling services to 0 always seem to bring these up. So the simple case is, please be using 0.12.1 for the moment. We'll get to in like a week, a couple of days from now, the device will be 0.13. But yeah, really you want to be using that version. So drop in upgrade to 0.12, and the release notes in 0.12 tell you how to upgrade from 0.11. I'm going to keep barreling on, and then we'll maybe stop for questions. The next we have on the agenda 0.12, which was our last numbered release on the 9th of May. We're coming into 0.13. That's actually going to be released. Where are we? On the 20th. So the 20th in your local time zone. I usually put these things on a Friday in my time zone, which is about a Thursday stateside. So that's coming in the next couple of days. We just have to write up the release notes, do some final spit and polish. And so what I might do is roll into what's actually the big features coming in 0.13. Obviously the most exciting one is people have been long asking for we now support session affinity, otherwise known as sticky sessions. And this was, we wanted to have a very simple way to expose this. Like, there are a lot of knobs about how session affinity works and how you configure various minutiae of the cookie and things like that. But after a bit of looking into it, we figured out that almost all of these only have one sane value. So there's, for example, Contour has to supply the cookie. It's not possible to reuse a cookie from your application because we can't control how that cookie is created. So in the question and answer section, I can go into, if anyone's interested, why we can't do that. But the net result of that is the Contour has to create the cookie, and therefore if Contour creates the cookie, we don't need to involve you in any of the details. So we don't expose those as configuration options. But it's in the ingress route document now. It'll be in the release notes as well. But the way that you choose sticky sessions is the load balancer policy, instead of being like least weighted or something like that, you just say cookie. And that's all there is to it. That will give you your classic cookie-based session affinity with all the advantages. If you're bringing an application over from Java, like you have a Tomcat thing that keeps session data in memory, you can't let that session wander between application servers. And also the limitations. Like, this is sticky sessions are a very not cloud native pattern. They they placed a lot of assumptions that the members of your cluster won't change frequently. They won't come and go. Their IP addresses won't change. They have stable names. None of those things are really true in Kubernetes. So we've done what we think is a reasonable job on this feature. There are always going to be some limitations because it's not a very cloud native pattern. But that's one of the main headline features for 0.13 that we've been working on. I'm going to pause. I can't see the chat from where I am, but I'm going to pause while I quickly review the other notes. If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can unmute yourself and say hi and ask anything you like. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Yeah, no questions in the chat, but yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat or speak up. This is a community call.
Cool.
Do you want to, sorry, Dave, do you want me to just show people the milestones here? And you can talk a little about the 0.13 milestones, or how do you want
to? I'm just going to read through it. It's unfortunately, like, most of them are closed and now a few of them are open, and they're just raw issues. So it's not exactly agenda worthy, but I'm just reading through them to refresh my memory. Sticky sessions is the big thing. Steve Sloka has done a lot more work around metrics and health checking. This is around making sure that the Contour pod is healthy before Kubernetes, like your replica, says it's healthy. This is done by adding a health check, like the pre-run and the run health checks. We've done more work twiddling with the Grafana metrics. I'm just skipping over a bunch of internal cleanup that we've done. Something else related to sticky sessions. We have removed the maglev and ringhash supported load balancer strategies. This will be in the release notes as well. The reason we've removed them is that we made a mistake. Envoy offers us a list of options for that field. We just said, sounds great. We'll turn them all on. Maglev and ringhash are used behind the scenes by Envoy to implement sticky sessions, but without additional configuration, they can't actually be used. So if you chose maglev or ringhash without any additional configuration, which we don't really expose through the ingress route API, you just got random behavior. Like without a hash key, Envoy just chooses random things. So because they were not able to be used safely, we've just removed them. What you really want is, the reason you would use one of these policies is if you were doing sticky sessions, and we replaced it with this strategy cookie name, which actually does what it says on the tin. So those going forward, those names will not be accepted by CRD validation. But that's, we thought about leaving them in place as just kind of no ops, but really they don't work. Like it's a mistake to kind of let existing deployments think that they do. So we removed them, and we removed them from the CRD validation. So you can't say those names anymore, which is, I think, correct. Another thing that we've done, again, which is around communication, is that since the earliest days, we had a directory called deployments, which had sampled different YAMLs for different scenarios, like using a daemon set, using as a deployment, things like that. Now, one of the words that I used there was sample. We've always thought of them as samples. They are examples to show you how to do a certain thing. They're examples to show you the RBAC rules you should use, things like that. So we've always said them sample, but the word deployment and the folder name deployment kind of has a different meaning in Kubernetes. It really does mean, like, here's the code, here's the deployment code. And that was never our intention. These were only examples, and we just needed a place to point that getting started short link to. So what we've done, we have not changed the content of them, we've just renamed the directory from deployment to examples to make it very clear that these are examples, samples, starting points. That probably brings into a much bigger question, well, where are your actual official deployments? Where are your Helm charts? Where are your draft manifestos? Things like that. And that's a very good question. We don't have an answer for that at the moment. It's something that we'll definitely working for, definitely be working towards for 1.0. Like, we need to have the an actual official, here's how you install it. But that's I mean, apart from just doing the work, that's kind of a complicated question, because if it does drive us down to a tool like Helm, that means that we are now have to become Helm experts. So we just don't know the answers to that yet. But I wanted to make it very clear that the deployment, we renamed this directory to be clearer that these are just examples. These are starting points for you to work from.
I think as you're working towards 1.0, as you mentioned, you need to update the docs and making sure that everything is easily understandable. I think those are great first issues and things that the community can help out with as well, because we do have a lot of people actually running this. So getting some help from the community and making sure that the docs are updated properly, I think that's a great way to incorporate the community feedback as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jonas. There are actually three things there. One is our current documentation, and this is something that when we merge the new website over the next couple of weeks, this will give us a whole new lease on life. Like, to be very, very clear, the current ingress route document reads like a technical engineering manual. And every feature we add, we just kind of make it longer and not better. Like, so I'm really looking forward to the new website in a give us a better structure than just YAML, than just markdown documents in a repo. We can actually have sections on, like, think of it structuring it like scenario based. I want to bring a Java application. It needs session affinity. Let's go to the session affinity page. Like, so we'll reconstitute the documentation to be more focused around goals and outcomes, rather than just Dave says you can't submit this without some documentation. So that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to. Now, Jonas touched on good first issues, and this is a great segue. We have two labels in the repo: good first issue and help wanted. And they're there's some subtlety there. Good first issue is effectively help wanted, but you probably, like, if you're looking for the one to start on, that would be it. Help wanted is perhaps saying we need a subject matter expert on this. We need someone who is this could be a larger kind of issue. Like, it could quite involve change. It could involve doing a design documents, things like that. So arguably not great for your first cab off the rank, but yeah, good help wanted, good first issue. I think they're even linked from the bottom. There's like a sample search at the bottom of the readme.md on the website, but we're going to keep highlighting those, because those are always the question of, like, if you want to get involved in content development, you know, a few cycles, you're interested, you want to find out more about the project, these are the places to start. And I do like most project leads, I spend far too long spending at the GitHub milestone screen. So I do try to keep them updated, and certainly keep them accurate. Like as if an issue involves to the point where, like, well, I might have to go and think about this again, then I'll definitely take those labels off, because I don't, like, it's not fair to anyone. They're like, hey, you said I should work on this, and like, well, actually I changed my mind, but I didn't tell anybody. That's not fair on you. So I do put a lot of effort into keeping those labels up to date. And the third one, and I do recognize that I'm monopolizing all the time, is to talk about Contour 1.0. I think that comes into the coming up. Our focus between now and between October and November, like the issue says Contour 1.0 by KubeCon EU, KubeCon US, is getting Contour to a point that, as the development team, all of us feel confident we can put a 1.0 on this and stand behind it. You know, for all the reasons that 1.0 is superior to like a 0.something release. So that is the big overarching story that's happening over the next 4 to 5 months. In support of that, we have the 0.13 release, which is happening at the end of this week. We've got 0.14, which is about a month from now. 0.15, about another month from there. We're sticking to our 4 to 6 week cadence on there, and those two will be the last, what we call the development cycles. Like, that's when we're going to try and get all the big ticket feature work in, and I'll come back to what some of those big ticket items are. And from there, the rest will be a process of betas and release candidates leading up to late October to early November. So that's our big overriding plan, and that has that has some implications because we're no longer just kind of rolling along just this kind of tumbleweed, just picking up features along. We are going to become more selective about the feature set that we're going to add to the product. In fact, that's pretty much set at this point. It's not that we're not thinking about features post 1.0, but I'm certainly not going to draw the roadmap out. Like we've been living kind of, you know, in a 1 to 2 month time frame. I'm not going to draw a roadmap up past 6 months. There are milestones called unplanned, and we will probably in the next couple of months have a 1.1 milestone, which is things that we intend to add after we get to 1.0. So I want to say all this to make it very clear that if you say no, we don't want to do that, or what's more likely to say no, we don't want to do that yet, it's not a rejection. It's more driven by we have to be quite strict about our goals. Otherwise, we'll never get to 1.0. If we never close the door, we're never going to get this thing out of the station. So with that, what are the big feature items that stand between us and Contour 1.0? The first one is what we call the first one is to get the Ingress route specification to 1.0. Like having it in beta and releasing 1.0 of the product pretty much means when we take it out of beta, we may have to do some major changes. So getting Ingress route to a 1.0 stage is very much the key thing to getting Contour to 1.0. We're going to do that in a series. We recognize that changing adding to that ingress route specification is relatively painless. We do it in a backward compatible manner. But we do anticipate we'll probably have to change something. And I'll come to what the thing is we're going to change in the next. But we want to do that as least as possible. Like every time that we make a major change to the kind or the name or some parts of the ingress spec, that means we have to change the kind of the version or the name. We lose people. We orphan people on older versions of the CRD. We put them in a situation where they may not have to upgrade immediately, but we're eventually going to have to remove support for these old beta versions. So we want to do that as infrequently as possible. And we think that we can do it with one breaking change and one kind of cleanup. So we intend to make one change to the ingress route spec in the next couple of months, which will actually change the name and the kind, and I'll explain why in a second. And then we hope that'll get us to the point that the final polishing release candidate will, if we have to do it, will be very, very minor. But we don't intend to be this rolling, like every month there's a new version of the ingress route CRD. That would be terrible for the entire community. So we're planning very hard to not do that. So I mentioned two things just before. And the first one is, like, you keep talking about name and you keep talking about kind. Well, it's important to understand that Heptio stopped being an ongoing concern last December. We have to do a bunch of things to start to integrate with VMware in the brand, and just the things like that, like the fact that it's called Heptio Contour in the namespace. It's com.heptio in the CRD names. We have to start to address some of those things, because we have to be, we can't keep pushing this old brand. So there is a requirement to rename our CRD, like to get the old Heptio brand out of there. And so we're going to take that opportunity to do the breaking changes we need to ingress route. We will continue to support the old com.heptio beta 1 ingress route for at least up until the 1.0 release. So certainly up until the betas and release candidates, the 1.0 release. I can't see that far out if we will launch Contour 1.0 with support for an old Heptio branded beta ingress route CRD. But we'll obviously, I've talked a lot about how change is hard and this, you can break and lose people. We're going to do this change as humanely as possible. So that is the major one that will be coming up. It will happen in the next couple of months during the 14 and 15 release cycle. The second change that is driving this, which is we're going to piggyback on the fact that we have to rename the CRD, is we want to do a better job at routing. And this is something that Steve Sloak has been working on. The ticket is called Routing NG, Routing Next Generation, which is a vague catch-all topic for, we want to have more flexible routing options. I won't go into what those are yet, because quite honestly, we're still debating. Like it's an open field of possibility, and that's a difficult place to do a design from. But we do recognize that our current prefix-based routing is limited. While we're probably never going to go down to the level of complete free-for-all regex routing, we'll probably have things like wildcard matching or globbing or something like that. So you can, but the major complicating factor in this is delegation. And we have to think of, every time that we think about routing changes, how do we think about how does that affect delegation? Delegation at the moment is very much path-based. It is include at this point some other config from another ingress route CRD. And we need to, that is one of the major design constraints that we're still talking about internally. When we have something to talk about, like we'll be publishing design documents for the 0.14 cycle. I'm pushing the team really hard to, like, this is the big thing we're working on. But that is both the technical and the socio-political situations of why we need to do a breaking change to the ingress route CRD. Okay, so that was a lot about ingress route 1.0, getting to Contour 1.0. Another thing, another big ticket item that we've been chipping away at for couple of releases now in the background, and we're going to continue to do it, is the ability to support Envoy and Contour hosted in different pods. At the moment, the default deployment, what we call the default deployment, the one that the quick start guides you to, and the one that is the majority of the samples in the example directory, puts Envoy and Contour together as 2 containers in 1 pod. This is very convenient. It's very simple. Uses, it's just one pod to track in kubectl getpo, but it has some limitations. It ties the lifecycle of Envoy with the lifecycle of Contour. It means if Envoy segfaults or Contour segfaults, the other container in that pod is taken down. This makes it hard to change each of the components without incurring an outage on the other. And really, the lifecycle of Envoy should be deployed at the frequency that the Envoy team do, which seems to be quarterly. You want to leave those pods running for a long time. They are your data plane. The Contour pods have a different life cycle. You may want to rev them, change. You may want to restart them more often, especially when we start moving to config in a config file rather than just the sea of CLI flags. And so separating those deployments separates their life cycle, which is the key thing. And it's going to unlock a huge number of things for us. It's going to give us an answer for how do we do things like just having a decent answer for doing status on ingress routes is a big problem, which is driven itself by the lack of leader election. We'd really like to leader election. We'd really like to have rather than 1 Contour pod per Envoy, just have a deployment of 3 to 5 Contour pods, whatever you think is a reasonable number. Don't forget that they're not involved in the traffic routing. They're just there to serve config. If they're down for a few seconds, Envoy will just reconnect and get its config when it needs to. But you may want to put your Envoys in a daemon set, 1 per host, stick them on host networking. So their life cycle is completely different. Their deployment scenarios are completely different. And we want to, that's the big thing, is to enable that. And a lot of the work behind the scenes is when these 2 things were co-located together, it was very simple. We just told them to talk over localhost. When they're separated apart, we need to secure that communication. We need to make it easy for them to find each other. The way that Envoy communicates over gRPC is via MTLS with client-side certificates. So we're coming up with a pattern for where to find those certificates, how to distribute them, how to secure them, we'll probably at some point have a tool which will generate them, which will give us back that quick start behavior. So if this is a new installation, the first thing that happens will be, just like we have Contour Bootstrap, we'll have Contour Bootstrap certificates or something like that. I'm just making up a name that will create all the certificate material that you need. If you're in an environment where you have Vault, where you have your own company CA, that's fine. You won't need to use this tool. This is really just a convenience. The interaction between them is the deployments will both expect secret material to be present in the namespace, write it to a file as per usual, read the file, off you go. So that's work being driven by Nick Young, and so that's one of the other big ticket items for getting us to 1.0. And there are, just before I pause for questions, some other things are my long-held desire to have a better integration with the certificate manager. I got to spend some time with JetStack folks a couple of months ago. We came up with a plan for how Contour can learn to write out the certificate request records that Cert Manager needs. We're going to do that either in process or as a shim, just like Cert Manager's Ingress shim does, and hopefully get better integration with Cert Manager there. And those are the 3 big ticket items. There are a bunch of health and hygiene ones, like we need to do a performance load test, get some updated numbers on that. We haven't done that since 0.6 last year. Still keep chipping away on issue 499, which needs a bunch of changes upstream, which we're tracking closely, but we hope that will be resolved well before 1.0. And yeah, rather than trying to remember, I'm going to suggest that we now have all those milestones between now and 1.0 in GitHub. And so things have been moved around and kind of scheduled for them. Sometimes they're scheduled in the milestone which I expect them to happen, but if they're big items, we're going to be working on them all the way out there. It's just GitHub doesn't really have a good way of saying we're going to work on this particular big overall epic issue over 3 milestones. It doesn't let you select 3, so I just did the best I could. So I'm going to pause, take a drink. If there are any questions in the chat, or if you want to, you can DM Jonas and he'll ask me if you're too frightened to speak. But yeah.
Yeah, if you have any questions, post them in the chat or just unmute yourself. We do have a few questions, but I want to open it up for the community. If you have any questions regarding the roadmap that Dave went over right now, please start with those. So do you have any questions? All right, I have one question for you, Dave. So you talked about
of course.
Disconnecting Envoy and Contour, essentially. Well, not disconnecting, but not having them be deployed at the same time and separating the lifecycle of them. That would then enable us to for an easier deployment method for Contour in existing environments where you have Envoy installed. Would that be correct?
When you say you have Envoy installed, where does that Envoy come from?
So if you had it installed before and you were using Envoy for certain things, and then you want to add on functionality from Contour.
Okay. Yes. The reason I paused there is I thought you were going to say, well, Istio comes with Envoy. That's fine. Yeah, that's the limitations are there's usually a strong connection between the listening socket, so port 443, and where it gets the connection for all the things that hang downstream of that, the certificates, the list of routes, list of virtual hosts. It is not impossible, but certainly quite complex to serve those from different not different envoys. Envoy calls the thing that gives it configuration, the configuration server. It's a very exciting name. It's not impossible to do that, but it's certainly would be quite complicated to mix together configurations if you had multiple configuration servers. I can't off the top of my head think of I mean, there are a bunch of products like Ambassador, Istio itself, which also fulfill the management interface, but I don't think anyone's really done a lot of work in trying to mix them together. I would almost lean very heavily on the, whoa, that doesn't sound supported, and kind of push you to say things like, well, what is it you actually want to do? Even though Contour and Envoy are separate, they have separate life cycles, they're separate products delivered by different groups. There is a strong relationship that a set of envoys belong to a management server. So they belong to a Contour, or they belong to Ambassador's version of whatever management server that they speak. So if you have Envoy installed, great. It's a question of pointing it to Contour. We do that again. This is another one of the things that it was great in our simple case. We have this thing called Bootstrap, which generates the kind of skeleton config file that you need to feed to Envoy to say, go and look over here. This is where you'll find the rest of your config. Again, that's just a convenience. We did it mainly for ourselves so that we didn't have to constantly be editing a config map. But it is by no means a requirement. If you are in a shop that's using Ansible, something like that, to ship your config, you put it in a config map. You don't need to use Bootstrap, but you do need to provide this little skeleton that says, here's the name of your management server, here's the address where you'll find it, and coming up in the future is going to be, here is the TLS credentials you use to connect to it. So yeah, I think that's the big answer.
Cool, thank you. That definitely helps. We do have two questions here from the community. Syed Hamid, do you want to unmute yourself and ask? Otherwise, I'll read the questions for you.
It's almost midnight here, so it's better if you can read them for me.
Yeah, absolutely, will do.
I understand all about it being the earliness or the lateness of the hour. Yes.
So Syed had, first of all, a Contour question here. Just trying to learn a bit about Contour. How different is it from the regular ones like Nginx and HA Proxy, apart from apparently being tailored specifically to guide traffic to pods and services? Tom answered a little bit, but I think it would be worthwhile if you could dive into a little about the differences there.
And I also included the link to routing traffic Kubernetes Contour 0.10, which was a post from March, which I think has a pretty good overview, but go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me take a few minutes to answer that question. Because I work in this product all day, every day, the terminology I use can sometimes be quite fluid because, like in our little team, we all know what we're talking about. We don't pull each other up, but there are some things that I need to be quite precise about. Most of the ingress controllers in Kubernetes, the Nginx ingress controller, the GLB ingress controller, Contour, define themselves by the tools that they use for their data plane. So the Nginx ingress controller obviously uses Nginx. It runs an Nginx process and it gives it configuration. The GLB one in GKE, its job is, as ingress controller, its job is to mediate between you and Google's global load balancer. And for Contour, Envoy, we serve traffic to Envoy, but Envoy does all the actual handling of the data plane traffic. So in your question, in your question that you asked, where you said Nginx, that's the role that Envoy fills. So the next question might be, well, why do we have so many different ingress controllers, and why does it need to be so many of these things? Some of them are obviously driven by commercial reasons, like the GLB is a commercial service provided by Google. They need to provide you an operator to connect to that. But to talk about some of the differences between Nginx or HA Proxy and Contour, for me, it comes down to the configuration interface. Most of the tools that I've worked with, you either write out a file and you tell the process to update itself. That's how the Nginx ingress controller works. I don't know, it might be different if you have Plus. I don't know how many people have Plus, but the standard Nginx ingress controller writes out, reads the Kubernetes API, writes out a config file, tells Nginx to hop itself. We're a little bit different over in Envoy land because Envoy provides a gRPC stream. So we stream configuration straight to it. So one of the ways of thinking about Contour is that it's just a one-way translator. We watch the Kubernetes API using the standard watch APIs. We do a bunch of data transformation to turn Kubernetes REST JSON-y stuff, Kubernetes YAML into gRPC, and we just forward that straight down to Envoy. And this gives us, from my background as an operator, this gives one of the things I'm really quite proud of is that there is effectively no latency. We have a little hold-off timer that just coalesces changes, but we keep that timer below the rate that you can kind of observe as a human sitting outside your Kubernetes cluster with kube control. We do that because certainly in other ingress controls that I've used, debugging ingress is a murder mystery. The thing isn't working. Okay, go look at the deployments. There's some pods. Okay, the pods are good. Is there a service? Do the service match? Like you go to each of the, just like in playing Clue, you go to each of the rooms and you ask the question: is the problem here? Okay, no, it looks good. Let's go to the next room. Is the problem here? And one of the things that can complicate that process is a delay. Like if there is a delay applying the configuration, you now don't know if the problem is with the configuration that you gave, like it's incorrect, or that you just didn't wait long enough. And so one of the things that we did in Contour is, because we can stream the changes directly from Kubernetes, we just remove that delay. So if it's not working, it's the config. It's not you haven't waited long enough. And that was one of the major reasons for choosing Envoy, the product, to do this, because it provides this this different style of configuration API. I'm going to pause. Maybe if there are any if there's a follow-up question to that. I've talked around the issues, kind of my stump speech for why Envoy. There are some other reasons. I mean, look, with the benefit of 2 years hindsight, it's clear that the industry is centralizing to a certain degree on Envoy. Like Envoy, we use it as a web proxy. Other people use it as a service mesh. Probably other people use it as a MongoDB proxy. It has, to hear Matt Klein talk about it, it is, he's designed to be a universal data pipe. It's designed to be a universal data pipe. So it doesn't, it's not prescriptive in the way you use it. And certainly if you interact with its configuration APIs, they give you very little opinion on what is the right and the wrong way to do things. So we take the kind of raw guts of Envoy, and we send a configuration that makes it look like a layer 7 load balancer. And so that fits very well with our ingress controller story.
Thanks for explaining this in detail. Do you know, it's been going on for some while, and the other ingress controllers like Nginx are being used by almost everyone, and the GK is obviously using the Google's one. So who are the main customers for Contour that you're working with and providing feedback?
Given it's a public call, I probably can't talk about our commercial customers. But that's actually a really, really good question. We don't have, like, the numbers I can tell you about who's using Contour are based on GitHub statistics, the number of stars we have. That's the number of people who came across and said, this seems good enough that I'll click the like button. It's a pretty weak metric. We're about 300 and something people in the Contour channel. It's not the busiest channel in the world, but so there are some indicators that there are people interested in it, but we don't have a wall of logos. We don't have a wall of testimonies. We don't have a set of reference clients. But that would be very, very useful to do. Some ways that we do this, like I'm involved in the Go project. We do a yearly survey which is kind of like a Stack Overflow survey. We just like take the temperature of the developers who are interested in answering that survey. So we should do more to get some kind of public testimonies, and also just to get a better feel for like how big our community is. Because that is certainly the reason why we're having these calls, is to get better in touch and remove just reduce the distance between the users or potential users and us, the development team. So I'm afraid I don't have a much better answer than that. I can't go into the commercial customers who we have. So sorry.
No worries. I was just probably last year when you were still Heptio, attended a talk from Tony Parker. He introduced a bunch of Heptio projects, but only Arc and Sonobuoy were the ones that came to my mind. Contour, it's the first time I was introduced, so that's why I was curious to learn more.
Okay. Yeah. If it was last year, part of some of the support offerings that the commercial support offerings we offer include break-fix support on the open source projects, Sonobuoy, Valero, etc. It wasn't until the start of this year that Contour was actually included in that, so that's probably why it wasn't mentioned last year. But we're part of the break-fix support for people who are under commercial support contracts through us. So that may be why it wasn't mentioned last year. Also, hey, we need to do better about getting our name out there as well. We need to do better about our publicity. There was I'm not sure if you've ever been through a company merger or transition. It was a very strange time, and we certainly dropped the ball on just like we used to have a pretty good cadence talking about stuff we're doing on the Heptio blog. We kind of lost that. That channel, and so this is something I'm looking forward to, the website, that hey, we have an RSS feed. We can blog about stuff we're doing ourselves. We can give you a way to subscribe to new releases. You don't have to try and figure it out from watching Twitter or something like that. You can just, if you're like an RSS geek like me, you can just subscribe to a release announcement and things like that. So we want to use the website to be a focal point to, if you're interested in following this project, this is the one place you need to go. This is your jumping off point.
I want to.
Just sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just to follow up, is this plans to use it with the VMware's Kubernetes offering, or have you already integrated into it? Something? I think it's called PKS.
Does Tom? Do you want to answer? Into that?
Yeah, sure. I'll pick this up. So Contour is part of the Essential PKS package. It is supported as part of Essential PKS. There's actually no reason you couldn't use Contour with our other offerings, Enterprise PKS as well as Cloud PKS. So yes, it's certainly something that you can take advantage of with VMware's PKS offerings.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to chime in on the who is using Contour discussion. Tom, you opened up an issue for Velero earlier, asking the community for use cases, and I think we should do the same thing here for Contour.
Yeah, exactly. I've taken a note for myself to create the "How are you using Contour" issue so that people can weigh in on our GitHub and just let us know who you are, how you're using Contour, give us some ideas about your use cases and ways that you can that you've been successful using Contour. So look for that. We'll definitely talk about it at the next community meeting. Probably do a post on the website as well to let people know that that's available.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tom. We got one more question from Syed. Do you want to talk about that one yourself, or do you want me to read it out?
I think I was just stating the obvious. So.
Okay. Then we'll skip that one. And let's see, we got one from, I think that's Shahar Levy. You want to speak up as well?
Hey, yeah. I had a question about the way that it's sort of like integrated. You just said like it was integrated into PKS. And so I know my first experience using Ingress was in GKE, where if you kind of just define that you have an Ingress, you don't have to like install like, the Helm, install like the Nginx, like at the time, like Tiller and Helm and all that to do the Nginx Ingress like thing. And in Azure, it was different, where they didn't have like the the back end for like what picked up Ingress. I don't know if I'm just speaking nonsense, but like it kind of got like in GKE the Nginx Ingress for free, where you didn't have to install anything. And then when I went to Azure, you had to like go and install and set up like the proxy. Is that what you mean when you say that like Contour is integrated into PKS, being like a VMware product as well, or is it something that I would also install in the same way on any cloud that I run it?
Yeah, so with Essential PKS, it's part of the package of bits that you get, including Kubernetes as well as the open source projects. You're encouraged to use it. It is definitely supported. You don't have to use it. But that is a configuration that you would be making on the cluster yourself. We have obviously documentation for guidance on how to do that. But yeah, so when I say it's integrated, that's really a packaged software. So you would be installing that as an option and taking advantage of the support that comes with it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just to give a little background, the way it works in GKE, I'm just looking at my cluster at the moment. There's this thing called L7 default backend, which I think is some protuberance of the Google load balancer into your GKE cluster, and that kind of comes with all the extra stuff, the other stuff that you get with GKE. So that they integrate at layer 7. Like if you just slap down an ingress record, it just works through Google's load balancer. Amazon, Azure, other clouds like that, you work at a lower level. You deploy your own ingress controller, and the first thing it's going to do is stand up a service record, ask the cloud for a load balancer, sends that traffic to it, and then it processes the ingress record. So what not to put words in Tom's mouth. What he's trying to say is you get Contour. I mean, it's open source. You get it anyway as part of PKS. But one of the things with PKS is that you can bring up Megan and her a very capable team and ask questions about it, rather than, I don't know, if you ever tried to get support out of Google, bit iffy. So when we say it's integrated, it's part of the overall support offering. You can install if you want. You can use Nginx if you want. They if you talk to the team about PKS, they have a list of supported technologies in all the different verticals, like cloud providers, versions of Kubernetes, ingress controllers, underlay networks, all the different components that we go into the Kubernetes cluster. And so Contour is one of those ones amongst supported ingress controllers. I can't off the top of my head remember the other two. So hopefully that's useful.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any other questions from the community? All right. Dave, was there anything else you wanted to cover on today's call?
No. I just want to give a few shout outs and a few thanks. First of all, Jonas, thank you very much for putting this together, especially on a short timeline. I understand it's your first week back after paternity leave, so I really appreciate making this happen. It's magical. I love it. Thank you to my team and everybody who came along and contributed today. We want to get a regular cadence of these things, just as a different way of like, you can always come find us on Slack. You can always put in GitHub issue if that's your thing. But I recognize that people want to ask and interact in different methods. So this is something that I'm personally very committed to. I'm going to try and make them, even if it means we have to change the date sometimes when I'm traveling. But I'll always be here to tell you what's going on and answer your questions. And look, if you want to put me on the spot about why we said no to your feature or a feature request, then I'll give you an honest answer as well. So thank you for everybody who came along today. I'm going to hand it back to Jonas.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you to all the community members joining us. Super happy to see you all on this inaugural call this year for the Contour community meetings. We will be doing these on a regular cadence, as Dave said here. We're aiming for every third Tuesday every month. So please join us then. And until then, have an awesome rest of your week, everyone. And talk to you soon. Have a good one.
See you next month, folks.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.